Another interesting thing happened is like I saw that you had started like your podcast and you were going over your like the sexism and the types of sexism people face, right? Another
Mhm.
like parallel that happened here is like the make me a sandwich joke. And actually that happened to me when I was 13-year old and I was the only girl in my school's computer club. They used to make those jokes and I did not realize that it was sexism then, or like I was too shy to like say it because I was the only girl. Like nobody told me like this is wrong. But now looking back, like even like hearing your podcast, like that specific instant, once again I was like, oh my god, this was hostile sexism. This was not something that they could just like make fun of. But yeah, have you like ever, like, I'm sure as a woman in tech you must have had experiences like which where you face such like microaggressions, subtle forms of sexism, which are so hard to like decode. Like they're problematic, but they're not that problematic that actions, like harsh actions, will be taken against them. Like,
Right. And that's like I think one of the pieces of advice I have to like any woman in the workforce, and I hate that I give this piece of advice, honestly. It's that like keep a running log of any time a microaggression happens because it will happen, and like sexism is super hard to prove these days. And so when you go into the workforce, yes, sexual assault still happens from like superiors. This does happen. I'm not trying to say it doesn't. But a more common form of sexism that you'll see is that people will do microaggressions. They'll constantly interrupt you. They'll constantly like take your ideas. They'll give you worse projects because you're not technical enough, or they perceive you in a way that's not correct, or like they'll ask you to take notes. These are all forms of sexism, and they're very subtle. A one-off event, you can just slide under the rug. You can be like, oh, they just didn't think you were good enough for that project. That's not them being sexist. That's just them like realizing that someone else was better for it, and that's correct. But if it happens again and again and again, then that is sexism. And so I say keep a running log of all of these microaggressions that happen. I hate that I have to say that, because when and if you eventually go to HR, and it's not a when, it's an if, as a woman in tech or in STEM or any field where it's predominantly male, you're going to have to, the burden of proof is now on you, and you're going to have to prove that that person is being sexist. And like I said, one-off events can just be swept under the rug, and it will be swept under the rug by HR. But if you have a running log of proof of being like, he interrupted me this time, he sent me this Slack message, he gave me this Slack emoji that was inappropriate, he didn't give me this project, he asked me up for promotion this time. If you have that running log, that's the proof that you need to be HR and be like, hey, protect me. I promise this is not in my head. I promise this is real. Sexism is real, and it's happening right here. So that's the advice I would give. That's the experience I've had in my, few years in the workforce, is that microaggressions are happening, and they're happening all the time, and sometimes people just don't know. So I want to preface this being like, I genuinely don't think people are like trying to be mean in a sense, but they just like don't know any better. Like your example where it's like you were
mm-hmm.
what, 13, and they were telling you to make a sandwich. Like what 13-year-old boy like is like, oh yeah, women deserve to be in the kitchen, and that's like their only role in life. Like they're just echoing what their parents are saying. They're echoing what society is saying. They're just falling back to that. It's not like they've decided that opinion on their own, out of research and thinking critically. They just like fall back to what they know because they don't know any better. I think that's the same for 25-year-old people or 30-year-old people or 40-year-old people. If they're not trained in like what sexism is, they're just going to default to what society has allowed for so long. And society has allowed like benevolent sexism for a very long time, and it still allows benevolent sexism to run rampant in our societies. And so that's the sexism we'll see in the workplace.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Go Girl podcast. For more such inspiring conversations, do not forget to subscribe. You can also follow me on Instagram at Japnit Ahuja. Until next time, keep being unstoppable. You go, girl.